Hey guys, what's up? It's munclesonkey and welcome to my updated and rejuvenated solo dungeoneering guide. In this guide I hope to just show you guys the basics of how to do solo DG as well as the general strategy of how it goes. This is going to be kind of a long video, and for the first part of it I will be going over some very basics of dungeoneering. So if you already know the absolute basics and how to really get started, but you just don't really know how prestige works or what exactly you should be doing overall, just go ahead and use the skip links in the description of this video to skip ahead to the part that is going to be useful to you. First off, let's get into some requirements. Dungeoneering isn't really a skill that you can just hop into straight off and be effective, and although these levels are not required to start off with dungeoneering, I really would not recommend getting into solo dungeoneering without them. First of all, you want 54 rune crafting to be able to make both cosmic and law runes. These will be really helpful for teleporting around the dungeon and will speed up your process by a lot. You also want at least 66 magic, and that is in order to teleport to the group gatestone, which is going to allow you, again, a second gatestone during all of your solo dungeons as long as they're one of the higher complexities. Again, this is going to speed up it by a lot, so this is going to be really helpful for camping large amounts of solo DG. Will speed up the process. Additionally, you want to have 80 plus combat, and the reason for this is because admittedly solo dungeoneering is kind of unbalanced at low combat levels. You're going to run into some bosses that are going to be near impossible to kill if you start off with solo dungeoneering right away at around combat level 20 or something like that. And solo dungeoneering becomes a little bit more balanced as you level up in the combats, and the bosses won't be so incredibly difficult, and you will have access to higher tiered weapons, which means you'll have much better accuracy. So I would advise holding off as long as possible to get that combat up before you really get into dungeoneering. When you first start out with dungeoneering, you are going to have to start out on complexity 1, floor 1, and then how dungeoneering works is you gradually increase in complexities until you go to complexity 6, which you will be using for all of the floors that you're planning on doing for the experience. Complexity 1 will be used a little bit as well later on when you get to a higher dungeoneering level to go through the lower floors really quickly that have become too low experience that you don't want to do them on a higher complexity because, of course, that takes longer. So you start off on floor 1, complexity 1, you will start off with some weapons in your inventory. I'd recommend to bind the ones that you start out with, however you will be upgrading these soon, and if you do have the crafting levels and the woodcutting levels and stuff to make better weapons, I'd recommend to go with mage because it's typically the easiest style to get weapons of because you can just craft staves out of cutting logs, and you'll find those later on in dungeoneering as well. There's trees scattered all over the place that you can cut, turn into staffs, and you can additionally get weapons as monster or boss drops sometimes as well. Dungeoneering is really straightforward. You just try to finish off the dungeon as quickly as possible by running through all the doors, picking up the keys. Just remember, don't bother to kill enemies unless it is in a guardian door where you have to kill all of the enemies in the room to proceed on to the next floor. And as long as you are in floor 1, complexity 1, or complexity 1 on any floor, the monsters should be pretty easy to deal with as well as the bosses. Eventually you'll get to the final room of the dungeon, which is called the boss room, and you'll have to fight the boss. Most of these are fairly easy if you do have the appropriate tiered weapons for your combat. So for example, if you're 70 magic and you're using a 70 magic weapon, you're probably not going to have that much of a difficult time with the boss. However, as I did say earlier, solo dungeoneering can be really unbalanced at the lower combat levels, and some of these bosses are going to be really hard, even if you are using the best weapon available for your levels at a lower combat, which is why I wouldn't really recommend getting very into solo dungeoneering at those low combats. But at higher combat, you should have no problem taking out most of the bosses. They do have various combat mechanics. For example, a couple of the bosses will use prayer, and you can't damage them with that combat style, obviously. However, for the majority of the bosses, you pretty much just attack them, and if you are having trouble and if you are on a higher level floor, just remember to bring some food. Almost everything in dungeoneering drops food, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. And as soon as you're done with the boss, you go ahead and leave the floor or proceed on to the next one. However, since you're just starting out, you want to make sure that you leave and change your complexity to 2, because you will be upping your complexity after each floor until you reach complexity 6, which is the type of complexity that you want to do to get the most XP. Probably the most asked question I get when it comes to how dungeoneering works is how the prestige system works. What prestige is this is a modifier that determines how much XP you will get after every single dungeoneering floor is complete. And the best way to determine what your prestige should be is you just want to go into your floors menu, make sure that every single floor that you are available to do is checked off. They will have little check boxes after them. And if there is a floor that you've unlocked and you haven't done yet, it'll be way down at the bottom with no checkbox next to it. So you want to go through all of these floors, make sure you have completed each one individually, and then you reset your progress after they're all done, and then you do them all again. And as long as you're doing this and you're not doing floors that you've already done and are already checked off, you will get your prestige up, which means you will get more XP. One of the biggest and most important mechanics, but also possibly the most annoying mechanics, is rushing floors. The reason why you need to rush floors, which is doing a floor on complexity 1 just to get through it as quickly as possible, is because of the whole prestige system, where when you do reset your floor progress, you want to make sure that you have every single floor you can possibly do checked off before you reset your progress. And if you don't reset your progress, you'll only get like half the XP out of those higher floors that are going to level you up really fast. So it's really important that you do rush floors. It is annoying, but it also doesn't take too long. A lot of people wonder, what floors should I rush? How many floors should I rush? Am I rushing too many floors? Questions like this. A good rule of thumb that I found, at least when it comes to solo DG, is you want to rush the first half of the floors available to you. Obviously, you don't want to worry about rushing floors at all the first couple times that you go through all the floors that you can do when you first start out DG, but from then on, I would recommend to do complexity 1 on the first half of the floors that you can do, and then complexity 6 on the second half. Whether you should do small or medium, well, I'll get into that in a second, but just make sure you are rushing your floors. Another possibility that you can do is you can do complexity 2 on some of these rushing floors, and then you can fish the fish and chop the logs, and it's really good fishing and wood cutting XP while you are doing your floors. That's an option available to you. However, you just want the fastest Dungeoneering XP per hour, just do them on complexity 1. But if you are interested on how exactly complexity 2 fishing and woodcutting works, I will have a guide to that linked on the screen now, as well as down in the description if you are on mobile. Normally when you go into a new Dungeoneering floor, the only things that you're going to have are whatever the smuggler gives you to start out the floor. In my inventory, you see I start with a group gate stone, which is normal, and you either start with a cash pile, or you can additionally talk to the smuggler to toggle that into feathers and anti-poison and rune essence, which is in most situations more useful than coins, so I'd recommend to go with that. I also have some cosmic runes bound, and what you do to get those is you just craft cosmic runes on the altar. Remember I said the rune crafting requirement earlier? You do want to bind cosmics for solo Dungeoneering because you can create gate stones with those in your magic spellbook. They will be under the teleport option, and these are very, very nice for transportation around the dungeon. As well as runes, you can also bind weapons and armor, and this is going to be very handy to start off every single new dungeon with some really good weapons that you can use to kill enemies. Enemies in Dungeoneering, just like in the overworld, do have weaknesses as well, so especially at some of the lower combat levels, it can be handy to bind multiple styles. Of course, if you have one style that's really high, for example, if you have 80 magic and your other two melee and range skills are around the 50s, you probably just want to go with the staff all the time. However, I personally use a melee switch along with my magic, and this means if I run into a monster that's weak to melee and is pretty strong against magic, I can switch to that and attack it much, much easier. How you bind weapons is you just want to craft your weapons or armor or get them as a boss drop or however you get them. It is very nice to craft your own if you do have the appropriate fletching levels and wood cutting levels and smithing levels and mining levels and all that, and then you just want to bind that and go into your bind setup and make sure that the weapons and armor that you want are put into your loadout. At level 1 Dungeoneering, you can only select one piece of equipment in your loadout. At level 20, you can have 2. At level 50, you can have 3. At level 90, you can have 4. And at level 120 Dungeoneering, you can have all 5 pieces of a loadout available to you. The strategy for DG is fairly simple. There's not really a whole lot you can do to improve your Dungeoneering experience other than practicing, which is absolutely huge and should not be understated in any sort of way other than getting the best weapons and armor available to you, which can be luck of the draw, just getting them as a drop if you do not have the levels to actually craft your own weapons and armor, as many people don't. Making sure you have that rune crafting level and magic level to use both of your gate stones, which is the group gate stone that you start out with, as well as the cosmic runes to make your own gate stone, which you should have binded by now. And as long as you're using these appropriately, I would recommend to place them on far off doors that are out of the way, and remembering which doors you place your gate stones in front of so you can just teleport back to them as fast as possible and save yourself a ton of walking time. There are a lot of puzzle doors in Dungeoneering, and most of these will just come with experience. If you do have any puzzles that you are completely stuck on, there will be a link in the description to this video to a page that explains how to do them all. However, most of the puzzles are pretty straightforward, and you will just memorize them all eventually with enough practice and will be able to steam through them. In addition to the puzzle doors sometimes having level requirements, you will run across skill doors sometimes that will have the level requirements too high for you to unlock. In most cases, if you are doing a small dungeon, it is not worth worth making yourself a potion in order to unlock the skill doors. Additionally, you can also harvest from wisps in the dungeon, and this requires the Dungeoneering level for the appropriate wisp. And then you can make a portent, and this will allow you to go through skill doors which have the skill directly on the door. However, they won't allow you to go through puzzle room doors that have a level requirement. I would only recommend doing this in medium floors though, not small, because in the small floors you're honestly wasting too much time, and doing these bonus rooms that have a too high level requirement for you to go into are not required to finish the floor. You can always finish the floor without having to do any bonus rooms, but they will grant an XP modifier at the end of the floor depending on how many of these special doors you were able to open. When it comes to deciding between small floors or medium floors when you're going to be doing your complexity 6 floors for the best XP, what I would recommend is probably doing small floors when you are a lower total level and still getting used to how to doing DG, or you just aren't really fast at it and really comfortable with it yet. But as you gain in levels, you want to eventually do medium floors to get the best XP per hour. The problem with medium floors is if you are a really low total level, the medium floors are going to have a lot more bonus rooms than the small floors, and you're going to be locked out of a lot more rooms because you just won't have the skill levels in order to do them. And a lot of these skill doors, even if you decide to potion or use portents to open them, a lot of them are still going to be locked because the level requirements are just too high. This is where medium floors really shine above small floors, is if you can open up a lot of those bonus rooms, you're going to get a lot more XP in the time spent doing dungeoneering. However, at lower total levels, in most cases, it's better to do smalls because you won't be able to open up any of the bonus doors anyway. So you're just going to get frustrated and you're going to get the absolute bare minimum amount of XP that you can from the mediums. So in most cases, it's best to wait until you're really comfortable with solo DG and have all the puzzles down by heart and are going to be burning through those small floors quite fast, and then you can decide to move on to mediums, and you will get more XP per hour overall doing the mediums. But again, it is a much larger floor, so it's a little bit harder to keep track of where everything is located and place your gate stones correctly and all, and this will just come with experience. That's about all the tips that I have for solo dungeoneering. The most important thing to remember and keep in mind that when everyone starts out dungeoneering, they're going to be slow. It's a learning curve. It takes time to learn exactly what you're supposed to do for all the puzzles and all that, and exactly how to place your gate stones correctly, exactly how to proceed through the floors as quickly as possible. And this is just kind of a mental memory thing. It will come with time, and you will get to the point eventually where you're a good dungeoneer and will be able to get much faster dungeoneering XP per hour. But don't expect this to happen right away, and just have patience with it. Because of the current state of the dungeoneering skill, unfortunately for Iron Man accounts and main accounts alike, to get up to around level 80 or so, solo dungeoneering is probably your best bet to go, as it's very difficult to find teams. However, you're also going to get some much needed dungeoneering experience for the point where you do move on and start using teams, and you will be able to get your first chaotics very quickly and move up onto the level 85 dungeoneering for frost dragons, as well as dungeoneering is a very fast skill and you will get a lot of XP per hour providing that you're going through those floors quickly. Hopefully this video helped. Have fun learning how to dungeoneer and getting into it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with the next video. Farewell.